Oh, hello. In today's video, I'm going to talk about my four-quadrant classification system for kill teams. I've talked about this before. I mentioned it briefly yesterday. It's not a tier list, okay? It's a classification system. Now, I made a video featuring this idea yesterday. I was just using it to illustrate my wider point. Go and watch yesterday's video about what happens if Eldari starts to dominate the meta to illustrate that teams are on a spectrum of complexity. I only really used it to call back to a classic episode of Tabletop Impulse. We had this classification system in the previous edition of Kill Team. I made reference to it then. But I did get a lot of two kinds of comments. So some people really like it and want me to go into more detail, even though I have done that for the previous edition, but I guess I'll do that again now. That's fine. And I got stuff wrong, yeah. I did certainly get some things wrong, and it turns out the best way to find the truth is, once again, to be confidently wrong about something on the internet, because Oro, on the Discord, went and did all the work for me, and sorted all the teams by the number of operatives per team, which I was sort of doing yesterday, and then I convinced myself I could remember how many operatives everyone in Kill Team had, and it turns out, in my head, a lot of teams have about 10. When really they have 9 or 11. So here's the revised graph, okay? And I want to talk about it a little bit. I'm going to get my laser pointer. You all see that? Yes, lovely. Lovely lasery pointery thing. So, here you've got this line in the middle. These are all the teams that are a 10 model team. We've got, oh, there we are. We've got Kazakin, Felgor, the Admech, the Harnkin, Salvagers, the Drop Troops, the Rogue Traders, the Harkin Jaegers, whichever it is, the Vespid, and the Novies. And then, so so this axis to the left, as you go left, is more Horde, or Hor, as I've sensibly written there, and on this side is more Elite, or L, as I've sensibly written here, right? So this is facts, okay? This axis is facts. The y-axis is slightly more opinion, okay? The x-axis, though, is fact and should be correct now. Now, I've done some little revisions from what Oro had done. So here are the 6-man teams, okay? And then I've got 1,000 Suns. You can run them as 6. I'd always run them as 6. You can run them as loads more. I think that the meta players are currently running it as 7, which I think is dumb, but there you go. You know, whatever. It's my opinion, right? My channel. So that's why they're kind of half in that column and half in the next column. And then over here, we got the teams that are 8-man teams. So there are 4 8-man teams in the game. Orcs, Harlequins, Blades of Cain, and the Necrons, but I've moved the Wreck Crew Orcs and the Necrons just slightly half out of the 8-man block, because really, those are 6-man teams with 2 lesser beings, right? The squigs, or the little beetly anchorite things. And I think separately, we can think of these 2 as the elite end of the Eldar, right? As true sort of 8-man teams, okay? Then we got the rest of the Eldar teams over here in 9-man teams with their sort of pseudo third APL, and the Scouts with their 9 men and their leader with 3 APL, their brand new employee that gives them a third APL once per turn, and they also have like a way to give out an extra APL. In the middle is 10-man teams, right, and then we've got the various 9-man teams here, okay. No, sorry, 10, 11-man teams are here. Okay. The Navy Breachers are 12 if you take both of the pets, or 11 if you take an extra Breacher. And again, same logic as here. I don't know that you always want to take the pair of pets, so they've kind of got in between the 11-man and the 12-man teams. Okay. Over here we have teams that are basically 12-man teams. I know you could probably make the same argument for the Pathfinder drones, but the support drone's kind of beefy, so it gets more complicated. And then we'll talk about the Brood Brothers, okay, being the 13-man team on its own. And again, you can do weird things with them and go up and down depending on what you do, but we'll leave them there for now. And then 14, we got the Krieg and the Chaos Cults, and then 15 is the the Gellerpox infected. And that's first of all, it's interesting in and of itself, because we can kind of look at, in terms of team numbers, where we got. If you take this 10-man line, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 teams with less than 10 men, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 teams. No, I'll count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 teams with less than 10 men. So it's pretty balanced, actually, at the moment, in terms of the... I'm not saying all of these teams count as hordes. I'm not saying all of these teams count as elites. You could talk about it that way if you wanted to, if you wanted to say more than 10 and less than 10. But certainly, I think these two halves being pretty balanced is interesting. Now, in terms of the y-axis, then, so this one's more subjective, and if you go on the Discord, you can see Oros taking a punt at it with his views. I have differing opinions on certain teams. You might have a third set of opinions, and that's fine too. Essentially, the idea here, in my mind, is that at the top, you've got teams where the majority of their strength, their power, the things they do on the table, comes from the stats that they have, the numbers that they have on their data sheet. And at the bottom are teams where the majority of the power comes from the weird rules that they have. Okay? Now, how have I thought about this? Well, there are some teams, for example, Zimbad was saying to me today, the Wrecker Crew, like, a lot of their power comes from the third APL that they gain, right? And the ploys they have to mitigate damage. And it's true, some of their power does come from there. They do also have big numbers, but the stuff that they have is really, really simple in terms of, like, how it works and when it kicks off. Compare that with Novitiates. You got a lot of player choice and decisions about when you're going to do the various things that you're going to do to make your team work, right? It isn't 100% the case that the teams at the top of the thing are easier to pilot than the teams at the bottom of the thing, but it's basically that, right? That you could basically view it that way, that if your team is towards the top of here, it's relatively easy to play, and if the team is at the bottom of here, it's relatively difficult to play. Now, you're already going to say to me, hang on, Phil, you got Navy Breachers right near the top. That's because they don't do anything. Like, they're just bad. But, unless you want me to put them in a vortex of things that have neither... they don't really have big numbers, and they don't really have loads of tricks. They simply exist. So I've put them there because they are a fairly straightforward team to play to the best of their ability. It's just that their ceiling is pretty low. Okay? That's my view. So it's not really, they are easy teams to play up at the top here. That doesn't mean that you'll win with them, because they might suck. Nothing on this graph denotes power level, right? I guess you can kind of think about it that the teams are near the top of the page. If you agree with how I've ranked them, the teams near the top of the page are easy-ish to pilot to whatever their maximum potential is. The teams at the top are easy to get there with, whereas the teams at the bottom will take more work. You have to be better at kill team to get the best out of the teams near the bottom, but those teams near the bottom might have a higher overall potential and might actually come to dominate the meta. I hope that makes sense, right? So this is what I'm basing. And feel free, you can argue with me in the comments and say that you'd rank them differently. But for example, let's look at Felgor. Felgor, you could say they should be a lot lower, because the frenzy ability, is an ability, it's not a stat, right? And it gives them a lot of their power, yes, but I've put them up there because actually the fact that they have the frenzy ability, but you don't have to think, frenzy just happens. You get shot, you frenzy. You don't have to put in a lot of brain power to go, oh, when should I frenzy, right? When should I do this? How should I sort this out, right? very different, right? Whereas down here at the bottom, you're making more decisions, you're lining things up, you're making more Rube Goldberg machines work. So, yeah, like the Wrecker, that's why they're on the same parallel here as the Wrecker Crew. Like the Wrecker Crew, they do have rules that make them good. I like the Plague Marines. They have wordy rules that make them good, but the wordy rules that make them good just kind of happen, right? They just kind of happen. So the only teams that I think of as being totally brain dead, you got the Angels of Death, you got the Kazakin, and you got the Krieg. You can play those teams to the best of their ability quite straightforwardly. Next tier down, you got some teams with rules that are really good, yeah, but they just kind of happen. You don't need to think about them too hard. Legionaries are really powerful in terms of their stats. They also have some really good ploys that you're going to choose when to use. Okay. Likewise, you got the Scouts. They have their scouting options that you have to choose when to put in them. You have to use a bit of tactical nous and decide what you're doing with them. But, right, you know, they are relatively strong fellas on their data card. You've got the AdMech, and again, you've got all their doctriners. You've got to decide when you're going to do your doctriner, which one you're going to make your primary doctrine, when are you going to do that, what are you going to do with it. There's a lot of, like, decision points and deciding where you are with the rules in there to unlock the power. I think, Arbites as well, they effectively still come for me into the more stats-driven side of things, because a lot of the power from the Arbites team comes from the fact they got 4/4 shotguns that hit on threes. I think they're powerful, they're a power team. But yeah, you have the ability to fire into combat. Is that something you need to sort of set up? Or is it just sort of happens in a fairly brain-dead way? I definitely think that they belong on this side of the divide. And then further along, a bit lower down, so the Inquisition get a lot of power from the fact that they can have a multi-melter, a plasma gun, right, a plasma pistol, and stuff like that. But they also do have some tricky stuff, right? So they're touching the line. They have some tricky little bits. How are you gonna use your no, you can't do that. When are you gonna use the hex assist? Those kinds of things, okay? And then we get right onto the line, okay? So Chaos Cults, a lot of their power comes from their stats, but you do have to be really clever with when you're evolving your things, which ones you're evolving, how you're evolving them, that kind of stuff. There's a big mechanic there and a big window for you to screw up. Commandos seem like a classically very chunky team, but just by virtue of the fact that, unlike almost all these other things up here, they have the bomb squig, they have the grot, they have a couple of other pieces that you have to think about a little bit more. I think they're on the mid tier in terms of, are they tricky or are they straightforward? They're just kind of right there on the middle tier. The Hearthkin, the salvagers. I'm going to call them salvagers and the Jaegers because my dyslexic brain can't remember where Hearthkin and the salvagers. Slightly towards the stat side, you know, they're beefy, they got powerful guns, they do have the points that they go around and allocate, okay, but it's largely just a thing that happens to you, so for me that they edge into the stat side of the bucket. And likewise, the Corsairs are right on the line. They are tricky to play like all Eldar. I think they're possibly tied with Harlequins, one of the more straightforward Eldar teams. But you do have to have a head for what you're actually going to try and accomplish with them. Harlequins, really powerful, but also when are you doing your ploys, when are you doing it, all very important. Harlequins will still die if you play them wrong, right? And likewise, you've got the Nemesis Claw. Don't get me wrong, Nemesis Claw are really strong, really good stats. They are Marines, but you've just got to be on it in terms of when you're using that Ventriloquist. That's quite hard to use. Are you making sure you're in Midnight Clad all the time and scampering around the outsides? There's quite a lot there to decide. So these are the ones on the boundary. And then just below the line, again, we're going to go from left to right. We got the Brood Brothers. There's a lot of list building in Brood Brothers. Which options are you going to take? And you have to be quite careful with them to not get them just all killed. Right, there are quite a few little bits and tricks and tactics there that you need to be able to do, especially around those operatives. The same with the Blooded. You have to be good at managing the Blooded tokens and understanding what you're doing with those. Okay, the Ratlings, you know. Yeah, Ogryns are straight up power guys, but I think actually there's a lot of tricks going on where with the fact that I realise I put the R-bites right at the top and the R-bites can shoot into combat. And with the rattlings, it's far more nuanced in terms of how you've got to try and arrange things and line things up and when you're going to shoot things. I think there's far more to do there. You got the drop troops. Obviously, you've got to deal with their dropping in mechanic. Once they've dropped in, they're a really stat-focused team that just sort of kills stuff. But the dropping in mechanic has to be dealt with. You got your Dark Eldar. Again, they got a lot of little wizard guns that do little different things, and you've got to account with your power from pain tokens, which takes a little bit of doing. The Blades of Cain, again, they have a lot of complexity going on in terms of when are you going to do the different things. That they have so many ploys, essentially, or what are essentially ploys, and the fact you can move their specialists around, but, you know, they're not weak. They're still pretty elite warriors, so their stats still pretty high, okay? And then the Thousand Sons, again, they are an elite team. They are really, really good. They do have really, really good stats, but you also kind of do have to be on it with your magic and who's using it, when you're moving it around, and who's flying from where to where to where to where to where, and who's doing what, when, right? Dropping down from there, you got your Phobos, the most technical and tricky of the elite teams, and the weakest in terms of stats. Your Necrons, where your Cryptics are going to have a lot of different abilities that you're going to have to make really good use of to get them to work properly. You really, especially now we've been nerfed, right? And you're coming back on only one wound. You're going to have to really manage the resurrection, and how are you going to get some mileage out of that? There's a lot of trick and a lot of nuance down here. Right down the bottom here, we've got Mandrakes, one of those tricky teams in the game, right? You really got to be on it with their teleporting shadow shenanigans to get the best out of them. In the middle, we'll go through, there's a few sort of languishing down here. Star Striders. Star Striders are just so various. It's very hard to get the best out of all the different things. You've got to decide which selectable buffs you're going to have. You've got to work out how you're going to use your off-board support. There's a lot of skill expression in playing Star Striders, right? There's a lot of different things that you have to do. It is not a face-rolly team. You also got the Jaegers. Again, the Jaegers have got a lot of stacking. I do this, and therefore I can buff there, and I shoot my rocket here, and I can do this, and then he can come over here, and because you've done this, and he's within this, you're in range of this. There's a real big Rube Goldberg machine going on with the Jaegers. The Vespid Stingwings, maybe I've put them too low now. I've not fully absorbed. Some people are saying that with the latest buffs, you don't have to worry about communion points, right? So maybe they should be higher up. Maybe they should swap with the Star Striders. Maybe they should even, maybe they should even go above the Tempestus Aquilons. But as I understand it, they're still a pretty tricky team because they are very fragile, and you've still got things you've got to worry about, like when are you going to fly high and create that vantage point? How are you going to make sure you're moving all the time to charge up your guns? I think there's a lot of opportunity for screwing up with the Vespid Stingwings still. And then right at the bottom, the Novitiates, one of those technical teams, and one of those tricky teams, I would say, in Kill Team, because you've got a whole extra resource, you've got a marshal, you've got very, very weak fighters, but they can be one of the most... Again, there's nothing on here. You could have a 7th dimension. If you wanted to make it into a cube, don't make it into a cube. If you wanted to make it into a cube, the Z-axis that you could build would be the traditional power level, right? Where is the skill ceiling for all this stuff? That'd be quite interesting. But we'd have to visualize it as a cube, and frankly, it's work I'm not willing. If you wish to build the cube, right, so the x-axis is the team size, the y-axis is how technical it is, and the z-axis is how good it is, then be my guest, you build the cube. We'll realize this thing in 3-dimensional space. But there's nothing on here that's talking about how good it is, just that the higher up it is, the easier it is to get to whatever that skill ceiling is for that team, in my opinion. Over here we got, the Pathfinders. A lot of mucking about with marker lights and doing different bits of things with the Pathfinders. They do have really strong guns, though, but they are a very kind of fragile team, a very technical team. The same with the crew, the Wormblade, with the infiltration and all the different nonsense that they have going on. And then right over here, kind of in the mid, a pretty technical team, but also a pretty robust team in a lot of ways. You got the Galapox. So that's my more detailed, as was requested, that's my more detailed look at this thing. I hope you found that really, really useful. And that is, I guess this is an add-on to what I was trying to say. See, this is the one from the last video where obviously I had some stuff in places where I've now moved it from. It is what it is. Do you think it's useful? So it's two separate things. Do you think the classification system is useful? Right? As a thing? And then how far do you agree with where I've placed them? Now, from left to right, they should just be straightforwardly in the right places. Now, thank you, Oro. From top to bottom, all I go is it's subjective. And you might well come on and go, I wouldn't put those quite there. I'd put them further up there. I'd do this. I think they're a more straightforward scene than these guys are. Blah, 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 blah. Let me know that sort of stuff in the comments. I'd be very interested to see your opinions. And that's basically it today. So a reasonably swift 20-minute video. Do subscribe, comment, like, etc. Do all the Discord things as well. And thank you to all my members, the people who pay me every single month for making whatever this is now. Especially to Nightfall and Sam Troth, who are subscribed at the highest possible tier. And this is the last video for a little while because tomorrow is live stream day, Wednesday is game day, Thursday, hopefully a battle report. So that's what's next on the docket for me, for the channel. So looking forward to it. I hope you're looking forward to it. I'm going to try and crack on with some hobby joy before bedtime, and I'm going to rest my voice. Because you can probably... The reason we've been doing shorter videos is because I've got the school cold. Cheery bye. Bye bye bye. Bye 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 bye.